Today, we're going to make 3 Harry Potter Halloween crafts based on the dark arts. No visit to Nocturne Alley required. Let's get started. This first project is an oldie but a goodie, and we're going to take the dollar store skeleton and turn it into a Dementor. Now, I haven't seen anyone do this for 2025, and let me tell you, they get cheaper every year. So our first step is we're going to make a hole for the mouth, and I'm doing this using a very sharp razor, and I'm just carving a circle into it. Bonus for you is you're not going to try and keep it under a camera while you're doing it. Once you have the mouth looking the way you want, you're going to need some Mod Podge and some tissue paper squares. Our goal is we're going to enhance the face to make it look like skin instead of just solid plastic. I tried a couple different techniques here, including dipping the squares into the Mod Podge directly, and I found the best method to get the look I was going for was putting the paper on the face and dabbing the Mod Podge onto it until it stuck. Because you want this to look like skin, it's okay if it folds. It's okay if it bends. The goal is just to make it bend to the natural contours of the already constructed skeleton. Now, as you can see, the paper might not stick immediately. It may fold or crumple or tear, but all of that is okay because you want it to look like the natural texture of skin. Once it starts getting wet, you'll realize that it starts folding to the contours. Now, it may eventually look like, why on earth am I doing this? But just trust the process and wait until you see it painted. Some other tips is you might want to use something like a skewer or other tools to help get under the hood. And then once you have layered the tissue paper to your liking, you're going to set it aside to dry overnight. Here's what it looks like the next day. And this is going to bring so much texture to skeletons that you just don't see in the stores. But before we move on to painting, we need to fix this drab excuse for fabric. I'm going to do this using 2 products. One is the creepy cloth from Dollar Tree, and the other was labeled black gauze that I got on clearance from Target. I like using both because of the different weaves in the fabric. The gauze is a lot tighter and smaller squares, but the creepy cloth has a looser weave, which gives it a little more weight. I made 2 of these, and initially I started with a base of the gauze, and the creepy cloth made it lose all of its flow and didn't really look like a Dementor. So what I found is finding the middle of the creepy cloth, draping it across the body, and then layering the gauze on top gave me the most Dementor look. However, before we start getting too far into draping the fabric, I decided that we're going to do a little sculpting of the hands. Since you can manipulate the arms on these, I want the hands to look like they're reaching out towards their next victim. And the plastic on this is really easy to manipulate with heat. So all I'm doing is draping the fingers across the tip of my hot glue gun to give them a little curve. And here you can see the difference between the straight hand and the curved hand. And I feel like the payoff is well worth the effort in this case. Now it's time to layer on our black gauze. I started by cutting mini strips and 1 larger strip for the hood. I then wrapped the hood around the head and made sure to cut a hole to be able to hang our Dementor. After that, it's all play and experimenting. I draped and glued, then I draped and glued, and I was usually gluing around the head and the shoulders to make sure that the fabric could flow underneath. I also made sure to cut the fabric strategically into strips to give it that flowy effect that the Dementor cloaks have. Once you have the cloak the way you like it and you have draped and cut and glued to your heart's content, it is finally time for paint. Here you see me using a satin finish, but I did come in with a matte because you're gonna have to take multiple layers in order to cover the white underbase. I didn't remove it because I liked the body it provided. But pro tip, make sure to pull the layers apart between each spray painting because they do stick together. And when you have finished painting all your layers, you get something like this. Doesn't the skin look so cool? So for $12, we get 2 decent-sized Dementors, and I'm going to call that a decorating win for 2025. Here you also see a preview of our final project. But before then, we're going to continue working with Dollar Tree supplies and that Mod Podge and tissue paper that we already had out. To begin with, you're going to need one of these plastic skeleton hands from the Dollar Tree. But in order to make it more like a candle holder, I need these fingers to bend. And the only way to accomplish that is by cutting each knuckle with my tin snips. I love these things. They're one of the most versatile tools in my craft room. I separated each finger into a pile and then started working on the thumb. I wanted the thumb to curve up as well, so that required me to cut into the plastic more. Then I secured the thumb with duct tape and glue in order for it to dry. Now we need to rebuild our hand, but this time the fingers are going to be curved. I did this hot gluing every single knuckle and angling them the way I would like. This means that there's going to be holes in the back of the fingers, but we will deal with those later. Sometimes this was a little finicky. You can see that I'm reinforcing the front with hot glue as well. Just make sure that you hold it in place and let it dry before we move on to the next step. While I do think this looks really cool as it is a little flimsy and still looks like a skeleton hand rather than the hand of glory that I'm going for. So to cover the holes and create the skin texture that I'm going for, we're going to whip out the decoupage materials again. Now, not having much experience with decoupage, I actually first attempted this with full-on paper towels. I tore them into strips, dipped them in. It was a truly miserable experience. They wouldn't wrap around the fingers. They were just too thick, and by the end, it looked like a straight-up mummy. So after unwrapping that monstrosity, that was when I discovered the tear the tissue paper squares, dab them on with Mod Podge. And it was a much easier to wrap around. I used the same tools. And don't forget to do the back of the hand. This is what it looks like the next day after drying overnight. One thing I forgot to mention is it also doesn't matter the type of Mod Podge that you use, because we're now just taking it out to spray paint it, and don't forget to spray paint the base you picked. Here you see me using a dark walnut because the brown provides more dimension than a solid black does. And for our last step, we're going to add more brown on top by dry brushing it with burnt umber. So you're going to see me dip the brush, get almost all of the paint out of it, and then start swiping it on the hand. If you don't like how much is on it, you can always wipe it with those useless paper towels from the previous attempt. I'm also dry brushing the base so that it looks more cohesive and gives it more interest. Finally, we're gluing it to the top. And if you can't remember or you happen to be new to Harry Potter, the Hand of Glory is a dark object located in Borgin and Burkes, and this object allows light to be shown only to the holder of the object. So you would place a candle on it, and then the holder of the Hand of Glory is the only one that had the light provided. So this was commonly used by thieves. This is the object that Malfoy uses to get through the Peruvian darkness powder in the books. For our last DIY, we are going to create one of the most sought-after replicas for Harry Potter collectors, the cursed opal necklace. But we're going to put our own twist on it. To find the supplies, I looked at the picture and then searched jewelry supplies that would give me the look I was going for. However, the website that I used is no longer in service. So here are some of the keywords that I used to help find my supplies if you're interested. I also linked some ideas in my Amazon storefront because you're going to need varieties of sizes, but I did not use those links myself, so buyer beware and check your sizes on the things like the trays and the capuchins. To get started, we're going to paint the back of all of the capuchins. Make sure that you are starting with the flat portion and not the dome on the top. Here, I'm using a combination of two different nail polishes that I had on hand. You can see the different finishes on each of these capuchins. One's thicker, one's darker. You can play and experiment before you settle on your final color. I ended up combining both of these together to get the final look. A couple tips when doing this is you want multiple coats. I did 3 on each capuchin. The other thing you want to make sure is that it dries in between each coat. Since this is glass, if you try and paint it and it's wet, you will rip the previous layer off and it won't look smooth and finished. Now we're going to form the actual base of our cursed opal necklace using these metal filigree pieces. These all usually come in a variety pack, So I tried multiple shapes, but all of them need to be cut to get the triangle shape I was looking for. I found that the best method was just cutting in slightly with scissors and then rocking it back and forth like a pop tab. Initially, I started with the tin snips you saw in the first shot, but those were way too industrial and I ended up destroying a couple pieces. Ultimately, I settled on the pointed star design because I thought that's what mimicked the necklace the best. Once you have all of your base pieces cut out, our goal is to get all of our metal pieces to match in color. And that color is going to be Antique Pewter by Rust-Oleum. So now we need to spray paint. Don't forget to spray the extra pieces as well because we are going to make something with that. If you're new to spray painting, don't forget to check out my tips and tricks video that will be linked above. And once everything is spray painted, now it's time to start gluing the cabochons to their trays. I'm using E6000 to make sure it's as solid as it can be. Now that all of the individual pieces are ready, the full assembly of the necklace can begin. You'll see here that some of the back sides are shiny because I only painted one side of the filigree pieces. Make sure that you're painting the raised side for the best effect. And now my goal was to create a full necklace. So I'm taking a square piece and a star piece and I'm connecting them with a jump ring until I get what I like. I highly recommend doing the jump rings first because if you glue the opals on beforehand, the weight is going to make it even more difficult to get everything assembled. And speaking of weight, this is where I learned the error of using filigree pieces. They could not support the weight of the glass cabochons. So I got to this stage and then couldn't make the necklace functional to even be able to move it. So instead, I switched tactics. Now I'm using the leftover pieces and I'm going to support it on a board. So this is where the twist comes in. Instead of having a full replica necklace, we're actually going to create a hanging sign using the same materials. I decided I was going to lay out the entire necklace first before gluing anything so that I knew it was proportional. So here you see me starting in the middle and then playing with the pieces. Now you're probably asking yourself, why didn't I just use the previous necklace that I built? And truthfully, part of it was because I was still forcibly hoping that I could make it work because I had so many extra glass cabochons. But then the other reason was I actually did lay it on top of the board and I hated the way that the jump rings made it lay. So I figure why not use some leftover pieces since they were ready anyway. And this is why I like laying it out ahead of time, is because I know that this needs a little bit more space to lay evenly. Once you have everything laid out to your liking, it is time to adhere the pieces. I'm going to leave them exactly where they are and use the glass cabochon trays as the way to hold the pieces together. The reason that I'm not using hot glue is because I want to be able to move the pieces, even if it's just subtly, and hot glue is not really going to allow me to do that. So to me, it's worth waiting the extra dry time to be able to make sure that this is as proportional and smooth as I would like it. Once you have all your pieces glued on and settled, it is time to let it dry at least overnight. The other good news is that E6000 is going to give you a more steady hold, especially for storage purposes. And once it has dried overnight, it is ready for one last detail. I'm not gonna lie, I think I saved the best for last. And I love that this is such a unique way to display the piece. But I want to hear from you. You tell me, what was your favorite craft in the comments down below? Don't forget, you can see my most used supplies and recommended tools in our Amazon storefront. That's linked in the description. And if you want to see more magical content, don't forget to check out more of our videos and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.